Hey, welcome to Tactical Crouch. I believe it's 153, is it, Joe?
152.
52, really? Oh, wow.
52.
We once again, without our beloved host,
Dad! Dad's gone!
That means this one is going to be a little bit all over the place. Hope to make it up with a couple of contextual information regarding the recent news. Otherwise, Jesus Christ, Joe. Like, everything happened in this since the last time we recorded this show. Like,
I feel like everything's happened and nothing has happened. Does that make sense? I know that that's like a very cooked, like shower thought thing to say, but
right.
Like, I had to look back and be like, okay, what did happen? Because I feel like a lot happened, but nothing really stuck. It was just like quick glances and quick just tweets.
Well, I'll tell you what. Glister happened, and that's already a lot for for my little heart.
That's
to
true.
Happen.
The shock did happen. Well, was that like right as we were doing the episode with Shockwave last week? And it was just like,
it might have been. It might have been.
I think it was like pretty close. But yeah, that definitely happened. That was big.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot more stuff happened, and I'm sure we will get to it.
Right. But I think it makes most sense because this roll is currently happening. And we're, of course, talking about the Paris Eternal. And I'll come right out of the gate and say that whoever leaked this should be ashamed of themselves. Because, A, those contracts were not even remotely signed by the time this was leaked. And there were big decisions in the way where this actually doesn't happen. So for this to happen like that, and now for this person to get all the brownie points, when in essence, what it really was a priority list that they leaked, and
right.
They seem to have gotten a lot of their top picks. It's reckless.
Which is good for them. But
it's utterly reckless, and nobody should be supporting this. With that little bit of annoyance out of me, I still really like the direction, and it is hard, right, to compete with the roster building scheme, because we now have two teams in Europe that are competing with European players. And we have also a bunch of other teams that are valuing bringing on English-speaking players. So you got to compete against all of those. And with that in mind, I think this roster is actually pretty good, even though we will have to talk about how good it is in the context of the entire league.
Of course. I mean, I don't think anybody is running around talking, and again, for people who haven't necessarily been following it as closely, obviously the news is still dropping, so I wouldn't be surprised if more moves happen as the show progresses. But as of right now, the two announced players, along with Avala being named as the new Eternal GM, are Naga and Onigod, two players who've definitely been around for a very, very, very long time, deservedly finally getting their shot. Onigod obviously playing last year as well and having a good run, but Naga finally being able to kind of step in and show his stuff. And again, a player that has been touted and talked about very, very highly. This is a team. If this is a trend to continue, like you said, is probably going to compete with positions against, the London Spitfire, kind of focusing on that EU talent, which is a region that has been rich with kind of diamonds in the rough that you still can pull from and make a very competitive roster with. This, I don't think that this is going to be an incredibly strong team. When we come to power rankings, especially, not a team that you're going to throw near the top by any summation, but a team that's going to be competitive, a team that's going to do well for themselves. yeah, I'm glad that EU's finally getting the love that they deserve and getting a little bit of focus, because it is, like I said, it is a talent pool that really hasn't been tapped into much at all.
Right. And for sure, there are certain caveats to be made, or reservations to be held. I think nobody would generally disagree that top European talent has been a staple for a lot of great teams over the years.
Yep.
Like, for instance, flex DPS in Europe is pretty stacked in general DPS roles. If you're thinking about KSP, Shockwave,
and this isn't even just a recent thing. Yeah, like throughout the history of Overwatch as a game, like
right,
Nevix, Kib. You know, you go back. You know, you go towards the back end of you've got Taimu, like all these like kind of not beta players, but you have a ton of just European talent that came out of the gate swinging and doing incredibly well for themselves.
Right.
So it's definitely going to happen. Like there's talent there, and there always has been. So it's been a matter of time before somebody's like, okay, well, we can't necessarily compete here. We can't compete here, so we have to go to Europe. And I think either one of these teams is going to do well.
I'll also say main support is definitely also a role that Europe has generally delivered. If we're thinking about Funny Astro, FD God, honestly think, like, for the most part, over the history of the Overwatch League, you would have to mention both neptuNo and Masa as standout players. So in that regard, like, Europe has had great contribution. You could argue that European teams have been generally weak on some roles. I'm thinking maybe main tank. But yeah, otherwise, it's also like I already can anticipate people saying, okay, look at Gauntlet, look at how like this narrative of being the best in goats and these types of things have been happening. And I'll
speak of the devil.
Did another just pop?
Now, before we get to it, we're gonna dedicate that specific roster announcement to our patron producers, who we did not forget about you.
No,
we just jumped the gun. Had to purge a little bit,
Right.
There was just we were coming in hot. We were coming in bothered.
Right.
And we had to squeeze one out. So the next segment of the show will be brought to you by our patron producers. Refined Bean, Fradinho, Pin, Battlecrab, Lotion, Rexane, Audio Compass, Kasha67, Sharp, Accustomed Nathan, Your Misery, Hunter Tane, Fabled Steven, Roger B, Owen, Chris R34444, Horbjorn. I listen to this podcast whilst on the toilet and in the shower thinking of Yiska, Peace Camper, Shrek 2 on DVD, Sir Girth a lot, and Bronze Bot Boohow. We didn't forget you. Forget about you, I promise.
Right. Yeah, that was my bad. I got juiced up. And
yeah, he was. I wasn't about to stop the train. I know the community loves their juice, their context.
Yeah, because I already saw the narrative breaking loose in the comment sections, and it's just unbearable.
Yeah, 100%. Just let him go.
Yeah, morally impermissible. So, right.
Good work.
But I think we can break these down point by point, and I think while we're talking about them, maybe there's more to come. So. Where do we want to start?
So with Paris, we don't want to skip over them because they just announced neptuNo.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Go Paris player by Paris player. That's
sure.
That's what my.
So do you want to start with neptuNo then?
Sure. Let's go.
Good.
Okay, so let me contextualize a little bit because I think neptuNo's career as like a main support player is a little bit underappreciated in the headspace that he occupies for most people. I think he was very clearly one of the top main supports in season 1.
Breach
was solid in season 2. Season 3 comes around and he has to spend a month in quarantine during the season. And I do believe, very much like the Nero situation, that neptuNo would have been the starter for the charge like last year had he been available to the charge for the entire time. But it's very hard grinding back, especially in the practice conditions that they apparently had during the quarantine, which nobody is really to blame for. So I think there's ample reason to believe that neptuNo can still bring it. Also from a leadership perspective, very hard worker, has a good attitude towards playing the game. So it would have actually been a shame had he not been getting offers in the Overwatch League, because I think, as we said, like that's a guy that you would probably have to mention in the same breath as Masa, who I also think should always, at the current skill level of the overall talent available for the main support role, should always be finding work at the moment. So I think this is a solid pickup, especially like from a veteran perspective, maturity perspective, and also European talent. So
it's true. Definitely lands well. I this is maybe you can kind of, vibe check me here, but I get the feeling that neptuNo is going to be a fantastic coach one day.
Yes.
Like I see him as like a Mythy style character from like EU, where like he's going to have a fantastic career, go out on a high note, and then just become like a sick coach.
Yeah.
Maybe specifically strategic. It's hard to say, but like I look at him, I'm just like, yeah, I could see you coaching a team. Like I don't know what about him. I just see at some point in his future, like him staying within maybe just esports. Maybe it's not necessarily Overwatch, but I can see him kind of like staying within, the overall FPS space, and maybe, dabbling in a little bit of Valorant, maybe staying with an Overwatch for a few years. I dare I say lifer, but yeah, this is a fantastic pickup for Paris. This is already a good base to kind of start evaluating Eternal with. And neptuNo, yeah, this is a fantastic pickup, and has, you just talk about his career. He's been around for so long. It's just like, what's the next thing? What's something new you're gonna throw at him? Because there's probably not too much you can surprise him with at this point. He's probably seen a lot. He's probably seen it all, especially when it comes to like just people he's been around. So it's like, what you're getting with him, and it's a good, solid pickup. I'm very, very pleased with that.
I also think he's mechanically quite strong. In terms of like, I mean, he started out as a DPS player, but it's also like, let's say you don't, and actually, I sincerely don't know any of the plans that Paris has. But let's say you don't have the money for a second flex support in a double flex support meta. I think you can put him on BAP and feel good about it. In terms of the level of play that he will be giving you in comparison to his other heroes. So in that regard, probably has even a leg up on some of the less mechanically inclined main supports that are generally considered very good, but would have to be benched in those situations.
I hate to draw this to a tangent, but you kind of like poked a thought into my head. If, for instance, like Team A doesn't have enough budget to be able to splash and, have a deeper bench when it comes to flex support, do you try to make a mechanically gifted main support play that off flex support role, or do you take your like dedicated hit scan player like we've seen with like XC back in the past with like Element Mystic, like Bazzi? Do you kind of put them towards something like a Zen, something like a BAP? Do you kind of where would you necessarily choose the main like a gifted main support like neptuNo, or maybe somebody like an Onigod? Like, do you think Onigod would be all that bad like on BAP or like Zen?
I mean, there is precedent, but
obviously he can't play. But
yeah,
you wouldn't be able to play in the DPS role and the support role. But
yes, yeah, I don't think there's enough precedent for this to be a thing. Of course, there are obvious ones and loud ones like Rascal, but I don't think, generally speaking, that's something you would want to do. Basically, also because of like mindset switches are feel very big between these roles in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, and the flexibility needed is probably pretty wide comparatively. And then also, if you're already running budget, of course, like you might not have the double, DPS left over in order to fill the flex row. So
maybe that's the question. Then it's like if you had to have an 8th man, or what's the minimum roster these days? Is it 7? Is it 8? I don't remember.
7
so if you had to have an
January
8th
4th,
player,
yeah.
If you had to have an 8th player, would you want an added DPS or an added support?
DPS, most definitely.
No, I agree.
Because it's just such a wider champion pool, and the probability. Okay, inherent in Overwatch. I feel it's much more inherent in Overwatch to have double hit scan compositions than double flex support compositions. That it seems much more likely for that to happen.
Yeah,
like I imagine.
I agree.
Just like go through your mind how often like Ashe Tracer, sorry.
That's the thing.
Tracer.
Is like I don't think hit scan is like a good enough definer for that, because I can probably think of like a handful of like mid to long range hit scan players that either I don't necessarily rate super highly on these flanking hit scan heroes,
sure,
or that just haven't played it professionally and maybe have it behind the scenes and showcase it. It's tough to rate them.
But you, of course, you wouldn't pick up 2 sniper specialists, right?
No, of course.
You would always have like one hit scan specialist that is like
right.
I'm not even sure if it's an interesting topic that maybe is a can of worms. So you shouldn't open it right here, but
yeah.
The distinctions we used to make in terms of like single shot hit scan DPS and tracking aim doesn't seem to be holding up that very well in today's structure. And we'll have to. It's really hard. Language is hard in Overwatch because we're trying to find apt.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, we're trying to find apt descriptors, but we also want some like normative power to it, so it stays with us for a little bit. But then the game switches so much, and language should be switching with that as well. But then we're confusing people even harder. And
yeah, because they're so used to defining it as one thing, and then the game changes, and you have to change the definition, and it's just a constant like catch up.
Right. Yeah. And the problem is like just saying like this guy is a hit scan DPS doesn't really tell you what he actually plays.
Oh, yeah.
And saying like someone is an off tank player or a main tank player doesn't also.
Yeah, Marvel is a main tank and an off tank.
Right.
Like you can put him in both categories. It's just like, yeah, that checks out. So now we've just gotten to this is a damage dealer. What kind? You just got to see what you get on the day. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel if anything, the most rigid definition currently is flex support. Where, because we didn't have double main support matters in a hot minute, there's like the main support the flex support player can almost always play one of 2 heroes or one of 3 heroes and still be good. Even though now I'm thinking about Moira Lucio comps, and there I guess it's a little. Yeah, but in general, we got to be fluid with language. At the same time, we want to tell people what's going on, and it is hard. It's tough.
Speaking of fluid,
right?
This roster, like Naga, from my understanding, again, not a player I'm super comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
Not a player that I know a ton about, and hopefully ideally we can bring some EU guests back on and contextualize some of these rosters in the future. But a player that I've heard around flexibility a lot. Like I don't hear Naga and flexibility too, divorced from each other when brought up in conversation. Is that kind of the same essence that you've kind of gotten over the off season?
Sure. And I think that's another interesting one where I think a lot of people in their minds were just like, that guy could be in Overwatch League, when in reality he had more than a Paris offer, right? So it's interesting to see how represented talent is in the general community, I would even include myself in that. Like if I'm thinking of flex DPS, who I would be putting in there and suggesting to people, Naga wouldn't have been on top of the list, or would have likely shown up as like a definitive, he's going to be in Overwatch League. But I also don't have, like, I didn't pay too much attention to contenders, and I also didn't see him in trials. So I think it's interesting to see then that more attention was given. And I also think, like, from quick research on and feedback from coaches on him, I think that's also warranted, because that's a player that's very coachable, generally rather flexible, doesn't have an attitude, like just the type of guy that solid coaching can definitely build upon.
I think that's the future. I think that's exactly what you want, especially in a game. And I hate to keep beating the drum, but until it slows down, then beat away, I suppose. That's kind of the player that you're looking for, right? Somebody that can roll with the punches, somebody that's going to be, open to taking criticism when it's warranted. And let's face it, when the game changes as often as it does, it's tough to not, maybe not necessarily slump, but, it takes time to catch back up and pick back up as the game's moving so quickly. You have to kind of track it and being able to help coach that player and allow that player to coach them. That's you have to be mindful of that. I know that it kind of started as a meme with Boston. It's like, oh, we're aiming for them coachable players, but there's a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a lot of truth.
And it's also on the coaches, of course, to level up these players in essence. Right. Give me another name from the Paris pickups.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if I mentioned this or maybe I wrote about it, but like you turn off the nameplates when you look at the Dallas Fuel last season, and you show me a couple Onigod games, you show me a couple Decay games. Sometimes it's tough to really tell them apart.
I wouldn't go this far, but it is.
There were a couple moments. There were a couple Gibraltar games, and I'm like, if you kind of blindfold me and just show me that clip and don't tell me the context, I would have swore that was Decay. Yeah. He's got some juice to him. He's got some weapons.
Okay, so
I'm not saying all the time, chat.
Right.
I'm not saying all the time.
Right.
There are some moments though.
In my mind, here's why I take some issue with that. One is one of the hardest hyper carries 100%. The game has ever seen.
Yes, I agree.
And the other guy at times can have skill peaks, but is generally more known as a player that can make do, and is probably like a 90%, like in the range of all these other great European flex players, like a Kevster, like a KSP, like a Shockwave. Maybe even closer. Maybe I'm talking BS, and he's right up there. But I thought like that was definitely a player that deserved another chance after the Dallas Fuel. One of the better players coming out of that situation. So yeah, I don't know. It's a warranted pickup. And the thing is, maybe I am a little bit for me, he's not a hyper carry in that sense. He more compares, okay, this is going to sound really ridiculous, but more like a Ursa type player. Now, people will think, okay, Ursa means hyper carry. No, it doesn't. Okay. Ursa means hyper carry, in the sense making a lot out of very little and actually disliking the situation of having high resources.
Yeah.
So that is more the type of player I think he is. But yeah, also like just super widespread on the Euros he can play. And it's like if you are not super solvent in or solvent is the wrong word, but spending a lot, then that's the type of player. If you can get that guy, then that's a great person to have in that 100%. Position, right? So yeah,
I think Oni, given some time, I think the narrative will change around him. And no, I don't think he's directly comparable to Decay. But I think there's star potential there once he kind of settles in, once the season settles out. I think there's a lot to change about the narrative from contenders coming into Overwatch League and then being directly comparable. Obviously, it's tough to compete with some of the best hits cannons in the world, right? There's so many talented players here, but when you kind of give Paris the benefit of the doubt, when you give Onigod the benefit of the doubt, I think they're going to do a lot with a little. I think of both of these EU teams, both London and Paris, they're going to surprise some people. And I said it before the season, you know, I'll say it this season. I think you're going to be surprised. I think there's going to be a lot of upsets. That mid pack looks way too competitive for everybody to get it right. I'll be very surprised if everybody lands on their feet with all of these super competitive rosters and they all look amazing. That'd be fantastic. I'd love that.
Right.
I don't see London or Paris with what they've shown me thus far that it's too far below competition. I think you're going to see Paris probably take some names come early. Well, maybe not early, but
okay. Let me contest you on that, because I agree in as far as we're not going to see a Shanghai Dragons situation. We're also not going to see a Florida Season 2 situation.
Mm-hmm.
But we might be seeing Houston Outlaws from a lot of these guys down in the cellar. Because I think legitimately they're like, just in NA, there are probably like 9 teams that are really good in comparison. And while I don't think they will get, like, I think of those teams that look stacked, some will just not be able to bring it to the table consistently. And we will have these anti-dark horses that just completely, like, shit the bed and will not be as good as we anticipate. And maybe those can be beaten by the Paris and the Londons of the world. I think, for instance, Vancouver is probably very likely going to be the worst team in the Overwatch League next year.
They're a candidate. They're a candidate on my list, at least. We'll see.
Boston looks much improved. I don't know. Like, it's really. I understand the notion because this team looks good, but this season looks to be the most competitive season.
Oh, 100%.
Of the Overwatch League yet.
And that's the giant asterisk on a lot of these comments. But I'm very comfortable in the idea that we're going to probably see another Valiant. Maybe for a short time. Maybe for, a couple months. Doubtful across the entire season. I think that's very difficult to do. But if the pieces are all there, and I'm kind of interested to see exactly where Paris goes in terms of coaching staff, but there's a real opportunity for them to do it, be the team that's more than the sum of their parts.
Right.
Where you can punch up extremely hard and start to take some names and start to be in a playoff discussion where in the preseason you had no business being there.
Right.
When you have all these teams signing fantastic Korean players, and then you have that EU team that kind of pushes it forward, drives that investment back into the EU market.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at these two teams, and I'd be willing to put some money down on that.
I think the nature of the next season is just going to facilitate that type of outbreak performance, because let's make some assumptions, right? Okay. I think hero pools will stay. And I think
some fashion, yeah.
I think 2-week hero pools look to be the way they're going about it. I don't know if that can be a structure over the entire season because of the reduced roster structure. Maybe tension will rise, and we will have a discussion mid-season or something. But for now, I assume we start the season with hero pools. We're going to have significantly less regular season matches.
Sure.
So I think that's a tendency that we can generally observe. We started with 40, then we went down to 28, then we went to 21 this season. I think we're going to have less next season. Think 16 over the entire season. 16 matches, which is 4 matches for every tournament qualification.
For every tournament. Yeah. It'd just be qualifiers, basically.
And
which I'm not mad at.
That means if you're good in the first 2 matches that might be on hero pools, theoretically speaking, it could be your first 3 matches, depending on how your scheduling works out. You could absolutely be qualifying for tournaments with that. And then once you're in the tournament bracket itself, well, then things look interesting for you, right? Then, of course, it's going to be no hero pools. Maybe that doesn't help you as much anymore. Maybe that helps you more. Maybe you hit 2 metas in a row where you're pretty good. And then there's a big patch change once again, right? I think that in that regard, yes, like maybe we can have one of these teams in a similar situation, let's say, how we thought about, is that fair? Houston season 1, where they had a couple of good stages, but
couple
otherwise,
good picks.
Yeah, like something.
I
like
think
this,
I think we have that
straight.
every season, right? Like, let me pull up the old contenders, or not contenders, but Overwatch League. Like, I feel like in season 1, you obviously had Houston. Season 3, Valiant's an obvious pick.
Right.
Season 2, you want to throw out 2019, splash in some Shanghai every once in a while. Obviously, it's tough because, hero pools changes so much and gives us so much meta variety, especially when it comes to tournaments. It feels weird kind of mentioning Paris Eternal, but seeing them peak as hard as they did during the Genji meta definitely plays up. It seems to be more apparent than ever that to win the league, you need that punching power, right?
Right.
And I don't think that these European teams lack all that much of direct punch. And I think that's very easy. Like, I think the Valiant kind of, I don't want to discredit what they did by trying to say everybody else could do it, but I think that it's doable. Right. I think with the right staff, with the right pieces, I think you can do something very, very similar. Right. I'll say that.
I think there's another elephant in the room about making sure they have equal playing grounds in terms of ping and everything.
100%. Yeah.
So we'll see how that turns out. I think that might theoretically pose some challenges over the season. But yeah, I think there is a way where they can be streaky and can hit a meta where everything works, and then they maybe get into a semi-final of a tournament.
Sure.
Instance, right? I think that's legit. I think that's where some of these like perceived bottom tier teams will end up being.
Yep. I don't feel super strongly about any team right now. Obviously, Boston looks to be making some changes, and we'll see when they happen. We'll see what they look like when they happen. There are some obvious, like we said, candidates for bottom of the leaderboard. But even then, it's like, maybe it's me being too nice. Maybe it's trying to give the benefit of the doubt. But it's just like, with hero pools being so chaotic, maybe you find your meta. Maybe you kind of bounce back. I mean, again, I remember plenty of episodes last season where it's like, yay, Boston's not completely, dog shit. Boston, is competitive. They can compete. I think it was Punk that they brought in and looked fantastic. So it's like there's room for these teams, especially with these new contracts, to make some moves maybe mid-season, hopefully. Again, what if? A lot of this is just what if, but I really lean on that narrative that this is the next season. Like this next season is going to be incredibly competitive. Like you said, I think we're going to see power ranking shift constantly. So it'd actually be kind of fun to track how we feel about the teams maybe after each tournament, instead of just like season wide, because they are kind of meta snapshots every couple months, every 2 to 3 months. So it's I think Europe can do it. I think y'all are selling Onigod a little short, but yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised.
I think that was all the announced players so far, and I'm sure there will be probably someone else being announced during the episode, and we can always go back to the respective player then. But another team announced a bunch of players, and I would love to see how you think, in your mind, they compare against, for instance, a team like Paris, right? And it's, of course, the Houston Outlaws. So, Outlaws, as far as okay, this is going to be dangerous because I used up the entire roster, and I'm not sure what that was actually announced, but so they picked up KSF, they picked up Piggy,
yep.
They picked up Happy. I can remember these three. Is the main tank announced? Someone tell me in chat.
JJANGU?
Yeah, is that announced or is that?
That is announced.
Okay, sweet. Right. Okay. Oh yeah, I remembered Harsh's tweet now. Right. Okay, so what do you think of that roster?
This is a team that I want to like, but I don't know how to feel about it. Like from the top down, there's a lot of it I like. I think Piggy's going to come in and maybe surprise some people. He played well in China. Happy's obviously somebody who I think is, brings that mid to long range hit scan punch that you kind of need for this league at the moment. KSF kind of like changed my opinion of him towards the Genji meta. I thought that he was fine and then kind of became way more than fine. I thought he was actually quite good. And I really don't think we've seen enough, or not seen enough of him, but I don't think we've seen the depth that he can bring. I think he probably has a lot more flexibility than he's shown us thus far. Yeah, it's a team that I want to like on paper. And maybe it's like the power rankings yelling at me, where it's just like, oh, you can't put them too high because there's so many other good teams.
Yep.
But it's another one of these teams that I think probably consistently better than some of the, I don't know. It's such a hard team to get a read on because it doesn't jump off the page. At least in my eyes, it doesn't completely jump off the page, but that's not something you necessarily always want. You just need a couple pieces too. And I think you get that with Happy. I think you get that with Dante. I'm not super like confident in the tank line, but I'm open to being surprised. I'm open to being, explained not who these players are. I've seen Piggy. I'm not necessarily too familiar with JJANGU, but I think it's going to be a better look Houston than we have seen in the previous seasons, which is good. Then you have to talk about the coaching staff, which I think is stellar. I want to like this team, and I just don't know why I don't.
Right. Yeah.
Where do you kind of sit on it?
So I think they would have to be considered a tier above, at least above the expected bottom tier. I think I give a lot of credibility to the coaching staff in particular. In my mind, that was basically the architects of whatever USA did at World Cup. I think they brought in assets that helped them win at World Cup with KSF. I think they in my mind, when I think about these two coaches, I think they add on to each other in a yin and yang way, where Junk Buck seems to be like the guy that can just like download a team, an opponent, and like has a really good understanding of double shields and that type of stuff. While like I think Harsh's strengths always is having a wisdom about him and a okay, so common sense is readily accessible to everyone, right? Everyone has been told by their grandmas to use common sense, and we all have these directives to act upon. There are very few of us that can consistently uphold these values and these life lessons. Especially when the pressure is high. And I think in that regard, Harsh is wise beyond his years. And is like they just add to each other very well. Now, of course, because I know you guys are negative Nancys, you're going to interpret this me saying that Harsh doesn't know strategy when that couldn't be further from the truth. Yep. So I think they excel in different areas, which once again, from the strategic point of view, helps each other. So I'm quite a fan of that, how they have made the arrangement there. I also think they have certain limitations. Okay, not limitations, but I think they have a very ambitious project that is under similar constraints that, for instance, a London team or a Paris team is under, right? So, like, if you're, like, they have always been the Western orc, and once again, Coolmat reinforced that idea. So you gotta have that represented in your roster in some way, right? So that, I think, in some ways, there could have been certain upgrades for that team, but you kind of gotta hold yourself to the values that you set yourself up for, and I respect that. I think it will hurt them in the competition, though. So,
do you think it will?
I will. Yes. For instance, okay, let me put this hypothetical to you, right?
Okay.
And once again, I'm not saying that's an actual decision, but if you had to choose between KSF and Libero, see, like, did you guys see how I immediately, like, I didn't play around. I directly went for his heart and directly brought out the big L. Yeah. Said Libero, and now I already won the argument.
Well, that's Joe. See, this is the thing, right? If you're kind of building from first principles and you want it to be a Western team, and then you ask me that question, I have to say KSF. But if you're saying it in a vacuum, then of course I say Libero.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. Like, obviously I want Libero. Like, if you were to, like, give me a budget and have me build a team, I think he's definitely a player on that list, and he's probably very high up. But if you're like, hey, build a Western team, or at least a Western leaning team, I think KSF is a good pickup. I wouldn't necessarily, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head where kind of the list or how long the list looks like. It's tough to kind of get a read on that, but I don't.
Here's my problem with KSF. I think, and maybe I'm completely wrong in this, but because KSF is so, like, has a propensity towards hitscan more so than projectile in his ability to flex, I think that almost necessitates either another pickup or hydration playing a lot of your flex DPS this projectile DPS next season, which you might like, but
don't hate that.
I think there are definitely heroes that KSF can take from the projectile role, which he also already did in Valiant, of course. But yeah, I think that's something to be considered. I think they have a much more elaborate conception of how they want to divide up the hero pools for these respective players than I have in my mind, and it probably makes way more sense. But yeah, it's like, these are not star level players in my mind, which you might want in that position, and is also still accessible on the market. So yeah, I don't know, like, in that regard, I'm a little skeptical. And then also, just like, once again, the competition will be fierce, and
100%,
like, just in-state competition is a little bit different this year, isn't it?
Yeah, that one, it doesn't seem like it's getting away from Dallas in the Battle of Texas this year. I believe they won last year, correct? I think they've consistently beat Houston, and this seems to be a continuation of that. And that's no shame to Houston, because they've. Oh, maybe Houston is due for, like, a fuel update, but I don't think it's that far off. I think they'll do well this season, but it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough. One quick thing I do want to shout out with regards to Houston. This interview by Lemon Kiwi for Hot Spawn. Shout out to Miss Kiwi doing the damn thing. Is quite insightful. Kind of touches on exactly how they built the roster and some of the downfalls, which I think Junkbuck in particular probably will help to bridge that gap in quotations. Yeah, give that a read if you're a Houston fan and want to check that out. And for those of you listening in audio land who can't see chat, just head over to Hot Spawn, look up Lemon Kiwi, and read along. So yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on.
and then, okay, I suppose like we also should be talking about the other players. The tank line is very interesting to me. I think Piggy was a highly contested pick in terms of off tank, which is saying a lot because, like, off tank is just a stacked role. I know Gebushi called him the best off tank in the world. Skeptical about that, but yeah, generally speaking, like I heard good stuff. Maybe not like, you know, like S tier, but definitely like A plus type of player. Yeah, that's a really strong pickup. And then I think the move that drew out a little bit more criticism, also was much more polarizing from the opinions I got from coaches, was I mean, not watch the name, JJANGU.
Okay.
And like, of course, like Harsha, I think said on Twitter, like he's a very mechanically skilled main tank, former DPS player, so that makes sense. I heard from some other coaches that they trialed him, were not very much impressed. Just like, okay, to mediocre type of player for them. So I'm looking forward to what the coaching staff can drag out of that player. I'm a little bit concerned about range for him. Where I'm like, do I trust him with Rhine? Do you want to gamble on Rhine? Jesus Christ, these buffs that are currently coming in.
Yeah. It kind of looks like it's swinging. I mean, no pun intended.
It's still 4 months away, so whatever.
Sure, I
agree. Like, yeah. But yeah, what do you think about that tank line?
Like I said, I like Piggy, at least from, you know, the seasons that I observed and kind of, you know, watched of him in China, but I can't tell you much from JJANGU. But what I will say is, if I was to just gold star that tank line and just say, we don't have to worry about them. Let's hypothetically say we don't have to worry about the tank line. They'll just be good. We look at the rest of the roster, I think there's a good chance, if that happens, again, that's the catalyst here. If that tank line is bulletproof, is good, can compete, I think Houston can make some big moves. I think this might be one of those teams to kind of not necessarily pair up because they're operating in different ends of the tree, but I think in a similar narrative sense, you could kind of compare them to some of these EU teams that, you know, you look on paper, they don't really seem that exciting. Not that, doesn't jump off the paper. I don't know why I don't like it. And then you look at the end of the season rankings and you see them at like 10th, 11th, 12th. And it's like, oh, wow, Houston had a stellar season, 6 season for them. Mm-hmm. I think this team, barring that the tanks, who again, they're coming into the Overwatch League. This is where shit gets real. This is where you're starting to get compared to some of the best players in the world, if not most of the best players in the world.
Right.
Can you measure up well? I think if you can kind of bar that, I think the rest of the roster looks great. I think you give Dante, you know, a good team to work around. I think he's going to perform. I think the same when it comes to Crimzo. I think the same when it comes to Happy. I look at KSF. I've seen good things from him in the past. I've seen good things from a lot of these players in the past. This is a team that has, as much as the P word gets thrown around, I think this team has a ton of potential. And I hate kind of leaning on that, especially this season, but it's the bill. It's just what we're given. There's so many like good teams. There's so many ways that this team can be good.
Right.
Obviously, we have to wait and see, but
yeah,
I would not sleep on them. I'm not one to just go, Houston's gonna suck. That sells them. That's not fair to them. Nor is that like what we're seeing here.
The thing is, dude, Joe, like, this is the equivalent of everyone's tough until they get punched in the mouth.
100%.
Like, everyone looks good until you start doing your power rankings, and then it's just like agony and just
it's tough. This is probably going to be the most like granular, like, oh, I like this coach more than I like that coach. Oh, you know, this team beat this team in the head. Like, it's going to be so minute. It's nearly like, I don't think I'll probably hate anybody's power ranking unless you've got like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I won't throw anybody with their soul power rankings under the bus just yet, but we'll see. I don't know. This season's going to be tough to kind of measure. It's already hard. Dallas, we'll talk about them because I'm not budging. I'm not moving with this Dallas pick because I'm seeing some of these teams come out and I quite like them. So we'll get to them. Not necessarily over, but again, competitive. This is not like a I don't know.
And of course, like the format will determine a lot of how things will go.
100%.
Of course, like I heard, for instance, like I'm not sure what we can predict the situation to be like, but I have friends that for sure will be receiving vaccines in January, based on them being part of the, German, what's it? Health, like they're doctors, right?
Okay.
Healthcare, yeah. So maybe we can accelerate some stuff, and then we get to travel in the second half, at least for regional finals, and what that then look like, and which teams then adapt better. Yeah, which is why like this is going to be interesting. How these things stack up. And it's really like you can never evaluate a team without the context of the environment that they will be competing in. But I can already tell you, I'm going to have preseason power rankings, and they're going to lack that crucial information. And therefore, I'm not going to really put any stock in them. And then I'll do them again once the situation is more known and we can have some accurate predictions towards that. So, yeah, in general. Is that another pickup by the Paris Eternal just now? Let's see.
That's what I'm looking. The Paris Eternal Kaan?
Kaan, yes.
Cannot say that I am familiar with this player at all. Let's take a look on Wikipedia. Obey? Didn't they just win?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah. That would. Whoops. Not going to talk about that. But yeah, finally a German player back in the Overwatch League, I suppose.
Sure.
But yeah, I won't even humor you that with me having an opinion about that pickup because I genuinely don't know. But yeah, is he from Netherlands? Was I debated? Did chat debate me?
I don't know. Wikipedia says he's from Germany, but
right there we go.
Good day.
Well, Dutch is really just funny German with a cuff. Yeah, okay, he's German.
Sure, I'm sure all the Dutch are loving that. I'm sure they're over the moon with that comment.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So that's an interesting name to put on top of. Don't think really moves the needle on the general scope of the pickups that very much in the theme of.
Well, I mean, it might not for us, but for somebody in the know, it certainly might, right?
What I mean is, like, it feels like a type of pickup that fits the mold there. It isn't really a mold breaking one, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Or paradigm shifting, right? Okay, and then do you want to say anything about Happy?
Happy to Houston. I think it's great. I think that's one of the pieces alongside DM, who obviously landed back with Shanghai, that I thought was going to go to a team and be that ons, that decay, that kind of rock at mid to long range, hit scan that is being proven that you kind of need. You need somebody with like impressive skill, like immense talent to be able to kind of compete if you want to do well. And that's a move that I think they absolutely killed. Barring the main tank signing, because I don't know enough about him, I think they've kind of nailed a lot of the big roles really, really well. Like, I like Crimzo a lot, especially if you're going, Western leaning. If you're kind of not necessarily limiting yourself, because that carries a negative connotation, but if you're setting those parameters, I think Crimzo's sick. I think Happy's fantastic. again, the big question marks at main tank. If they can land all 3, I think Houston does really well. Even 2 out of 3, I think they're going to be competitive, like solidly so. I don't think this is going to be just like a poo-poo Houston, we don't do well on stage type of team. I think this is going to be a new look Houston for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I will say, I mean, I hate to double back to Paris real quick, but like, I'm interested to see what this rookie class looks like. Because there are some like new players.
Sure.
Like Kaan coming in, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know anything about you. Let's see. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be really cool to see. Because again, talking about language, rookie in Overwatch is weird to say the least. You're giving most of the time you're giving your rookie player, like Sparkle was in the rookie of the year discussion, right? It's just like Alarm, obviously one rookie of the year, not a rookie, right?
Yeah.
In the Overwatch League's eyes, 100%. First time in the season or first time in the league, of course, 100%. You have to view them as rookies, but who do you like? I guess who do you think? But when do you think maybe we'll see like a more true rookie in the sense of like a kind of new player coming up immediately through contenders, having that big splash and landing? I obviously don't know much about Kaan, but kind of plants the seed in my head. It's like, oh, kind of a new player. I haven't seen too much or haven't heard too much about him. Maybe comes in, has a stellar season, gets the closest we probably have come to actually seeing like a true Overwatch rookie instead of Overwatch League rookie of the year.
Right.
I think that'll be dope. But again, anecdote, kind of not anecdote, but just pin for later to kind of keep in mind.
All right. And chat, I'm aware that Joe's frozen. I'm sorry. I can't.
Oh,
really
can you hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you. No worries. But it's a charming freeze frame. So.
Oh, great. Let's see.
Right.
Okay, not terrible, not awful.
Yep. Okay. So then, the big ones.
The biggins.
Nero and Glister to the San Francisco Shock.
Oh, it's too good. Like, I think in my as I continue to grow old and mature, I'm being more comfortable just like with the contrarian in me. That's just like, okay, if things are too good, I shift the complete opposite direction. It's like, well, we got to temper expectations. But if things are like too bad, then I swing the other side. Like, no, let's be positive about the things that are, completely poop. My heart wants to be super excited about this, but my brain is like, yo, they can't just do it to him again. These are too good of pickups. Now something's gonna go wrong. This can't be it. This can't be it. There's something pulling me back, and I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But these pickups, Nero's fantastic. Glister, you've got a championship winning duo there, and you're adding to a championship core. What do you say? When you've dropped, when this coaching staff has dropped players not dropped players, but as part of ways with players in the past, and some retired, some have traded, gone through hero pools, still came out on top, still looked good throughout most of the season. You give them more tools like this. Can you really put it past them to be able to do it again?
Yeah,
I think it's likely at this point.
Yeah,
I was waiting to see what they ended up with, and they ended up with some of the best.
Yeah.
I don't know how they keep getting away with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the entire discussion surrounding that conversation was interesting. In terms of like their ability to just like get this talent. We're kind of late to the party, to the discussion of like, oh, they're overspending or they're like big spenders and that's why they get all the best players, which
that's not even true, right?
Yeah, it's not true.
No.
Like they just have an appealing product there and
program rather.
Yeah. And that players want to be part of. They want to be they want to be working with what everyone seems to be agreeing the best coach in Overwatch history. They want to be this good. They want to have security. I think the point that Avast made makes perfect sense. even though there isn't even that much precedent in terms of like former Shock players that found employment just based on being on the Shock. But I think that still holds sway in that regard towards the decision of what these players make. I also think the point that Albert made, and I made the same one about prize money shares and what you can expect to earn from there is salient. So, yeah, overall, I think it's not bad for the league that they are getting these players. I also think there's something to be said about continuously losing coaching talent that doesn't seem to be taken into account when we're judging the power levels that the Shock are at. Like letting go 9K, letting go Junkbuck, like that's a blow to any franchise.
Oh,
those are high quality 100%. Coaches that have, like, especially in 9K's case, already have done phenomenal jobs at
elsewhere
new organizations. So like we only seem to be talking about the players that they pick up and how the rich get richer in that regard, when in all actual fact, keeping their coaching lineup together seems to be much more competitive for them, because like a lot of these guys are just getting head coach jobs. I didn't even mention Arachne, right? Like that's another name. So of course they also attracted some really good coaches once again, but maybe not ones that should like command the same quality just yet, and will have to prove once again that they are on the same level as the ones that left. But it's an interesting development. I think this is definitely an announcement for a three-peat, but they are not invincible, guys.
Oh no,
they are metas, most definitely metas where that team might run into struggles unless there are other elements that were brought in with the new recruits that bridge those gaps, right? For certain meta developments, right? I also think you already saw that once important pieces leave the Shock and those pieces become relevant, and I'm thinking of Genji metas specifically with
sure.
Was it a Summer Showdown that's yes,
I believe
Summer Showdown, where I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that Architect is gone, and then they play in the final against in a Genji meta, and they don't win that one. There's no, like, it's not strong evidence, but I don't believe this to be random. So now we have to ask who left and where is that important in these respective situations. Well, I still would 100%, of course, put them as favorites for next year at any given point, based on the moves they've made. They have not significantly downgraded in any regard. This feeling of invincibility, I don't share. I think they did look vulnerable over the season at times.
Over the season, yeah,
and
sure.
I think there could be factors that if the meta, like just in like the playoffs, switches to something very unfavorable, they might be going out earlier than we even expect. So, now the field where the punches could be coming from isn't just like 4 teams, 5 teams.
No,
it is likely to be 10 teams.
Yep,
it's likely to be 12 to 14 teams. So,
as begrudgingly as I want to admit that 10 teams could win the league,
right?
You guys were right. Yeah, 10 teams could actually win the league. Like, they're all candidates.
The best teams are gamblers.
Some teams haven't even announced yet.
That's what happens, right?
Yes.
If you get into the playoffs and it's your meta, then you can be Seoul and you can almost win the Overwatch League.
Yep.
And if it
just gonna say that
goes any, like, I don't think we appreciate the closeness of that actually happening. And I think this is just a property of our system, and that makes it very hard for a team like Shock to be so competitive. That's why it's so amazing that they are for such a long time. But that makes their dominance questionable over new circumstances and more volatility next year.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think this is as decided as as daunting as the community apparently had the feeling when that announcement came, and I think we're kind of over it now anyway. But generally speaking, I welcome. I want to see players like Nero and Glister be put into teams where they can show what they're really made of.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to show the potential that they can be MVP candidates coming into the next season.
Yep.
So yeah, overall, I don't think it's bad for the league at all. I also think
not at all.
That the reception to like Nero being picked up and everything, it's weird that that it feels like the crowd that misses Sinatra is skeptical about Nero, when in essence that could be a perfect, that guy could take that place in your heart once again. Right?
Oh, easily. I think people are just skeptical because they're, I think, familiar. I think people probably don't spend enough time in APAC as they probably should to kind of prepare themselves for Nero, who I think is a fantastic player, can probably be this team's Sinatra. I think that's a great, not segue, but kind of lateral move. I think does a lot for this team. But to kind of quickly tackle that point about the coaching, I do think it's a fantastic blow to this team. I think that's where Crusty and his new look shock in 2021 are going to be tested. I think that's the new narrative that they're going to have to be tested against. But can you name me another, franchise? Can you name me another coaching staff that has gone through so much and still continued to be so successful? If there's a team that was going to consistently be tested and check the box each and every time they come to that, how is it not this team?
Dude, okay, I'm not going to name names, right? But there were some players that the shock considered where I was like, either I'm really not seeing it and nobody else is,
right?
Or that's a pickup that might just be too much even for Crusty. And if it wasn't, he's the God King who will just take everyone's firstborns, right? So, I wonder. It's really hard to not develop the feeling that you can just do everything you want, and to he has been doing it for 3 years now. He's taking somebody. He understands somebody about the system. And in 3 teams, 3 out of 3, he takes either given up on talent and makes them world class, or absolute nobodies and makes them world class.
Yep.
So
I will what blows me away is that he took a DPS player from the Rocks Orcas. I guarantee you 90% of chat in the YouTube comments don't even know what that team or where that team played. He took a DPS player from there and made him a star, who is considered to be the best, is regarded and regaled as one of the best players in the world. That doesn't happen. He did that on Boston. Then he won 2 championships with the Shock. I get, and you have to give him this kind of story. You let go some fantastic coaches that are going to make the league a better ecosystem, much more competitive, 100%. But if there's anybody to do it, if there's anybody to repeat longer than anybody else has repeated in the most difficult era, it's Crusty.
It's weird. It shouldn't be this obvious.
This is the candidate.
It really shouldn't be. There's not even really a precedent in esports for a coach that does what he has done in Overwatch. I feel pretty secure not being a nephew take. Can you name me a coach that just takes whoever Joe Schmo from the corner and just makes him a top player, and then also dominates leagues in the fashion that the San Francisco Shock have done, and previously also the Boston Uprising?
hey, you're preaching to the choir here, brother. I'm on board with that, but I don't feel confident, and I don't have the breadth of knowledge in enough other esports, especially ones that are at the top level, namely CS. I feel confident
I don't think that's
in kind of referring to League, but I wouldn't be able to kind of feel confident in naming,
right,
or being, to discredit somebody. I think a lot of people look at, Coma from T1.
Yes.
But there again, he has, the best player in the world and is banked on it. So it's like, is that necessarily fair? Does the game change as much? That one's tough. I think that would be a fun piece of content to take, experts from every era, or not every era, but every like facet of some of these big esports, and really try to like make the case and see what they have to say. But it's tough to be able to kind of branch outside of Overwatch. I think if he does it again, I think that's a discussion. I think it has to be in discussion with all the context and the argument, the kind of preamble that he brings to the table. I think he sits at that table amongst the greats. I think you have to consider him. There again, everybody looks tough until they get punched in the face, like you said. Let's see if he can do it. If there's anybody that can do it, it's him. And I think this is why we still return back to, amongst other reasons, a team like Lunatic High, who could be consistent. I think that's why we return back to a team like Rogue, a team like Team Envy, who could be consistent in a game that is inconsistent, who doesn't know what it wants to be, who is Overwatch is chaos. So if you can give a sense of normalcy, I think people attach to that and latch onto it, and they go crazy with it. And now, oh my God, nobody can ever beat Lunatic High. I remember making those comments. I remember fielding, hearing them. Same thing with Envy in the West and Rogue in the West. And this could be it. We'll have to see. But this is another one of those candidates amongst the rest of them in history that's like, they've got the ticket. Let's see if they can execute. And I think that's Shock next year. If they can make 3, even if they can get to the grand finals, I think that's already a fantastic argument to be had. If they can make 3 grand finals in a row and maybe slip up in the third, come on. I don't think that's a loss.
Yeah, I just got an idea for fire content. I just gotta jot down real quick. But yeah, please. Let me find a segue before we do that. So, okay, I think it bears talking about these players individually, not just in the context of Shock. So, okay, Glister comes into the league. I feel like I'm having big take delay again, where in season 2, I already said like Decay would be the best rookie coming into season 2, and then Goats happened. Yep. And then I said Glister is going to be the best rookie in season 3, and then London happened, and COVID, where they had to play against like a lot of strong teams. Yep. So I feel like this is his Decay moment, where like
should be. There again, he's playing behind a lot of fantastic players, though.
I don't care. I really don't care. I think he's built different. Just for
I think I agree. I think there's a lot of other players that are very built very differently as well. So it's like, does he get the stage time that he rightfully deserves? Like somebody like an Architect, like somebody like a Rascal, like somebody like a Sinatra, like somebody like a Striker. Again, Shock kind of have an embarrassment of riches problem, where all of these players could be MVPs if they played on different teams, but they're here to win rings, and they're part of the system, and they show up when they need to. I think people will. I think the narrative and the stocks, if we're gonna use that kind of terminology, I think they go up with Glister, but I don't think they skyrocket. He has to see a lot of playtime, which is possible. That's no discredit to him, but with that roster, you could see very little Glister, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Or you could see a whole lot of Glister, and I don't think that's a bad thing either. I think there's room for him to still be considered kind of like an underdog dark horse pick, as bizarre as that sounds.
Yeah. Like, I'm really excited about that one. I'm also excited about Nero, of course, but
yeah, I think it's just fun to be excited about the Shock. His team's stacked.
My thing is, okay, I saw Glister do things in contenders that I've not seen do anyone else do. I think he has otherworldly reflexes. He has otherworldly ability to pick up and process information on the fly. I'm not sure how that works at scale or at volume, so we will have to see that. I also agree that while he was good, he wasn't great last year, but there's a lot of reasons why that could be. And I really hope that he crystallizes as a starting player for the Shock, but this will likely be very meta dependent for the next
100%.
So yeah,
Glister is one of those. I think you hit the nail on the head. He's definitely built differently. Somebody who deserves a ring, and I think that's kind of the goal of the Shock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to just kind of continue to praise them as much as, you know, they have a test here. The test is, can Crusty do what he's done before with even less help when it comes to coaching, or a new coaching regime? Maybe that's a better fit, because again, the coaches that they have picked up aren't bad by any means, but do they kind of hold the same water as some of these teams or some of these names like a 9K, you know?
Mm-hmm.
With San Francisco, they're building like an identity that I don't think anybody else has really done, other than like bad teams are bad, right? You don't go to this bad team because you're just going to lose anyways. And that's the only, like, there's only polarizing identities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, maybe it's a can of worms. Maybe it's better let it age and open it in a different medium. But I think, and I don't know how you'd go about it, but making an identity for your franchise and really kind of sticking to it and having that vision. And sometimes they're gifted to you. Sometimes, you know, the Shock pick up the best coach in the world and he gives you 2 trophies and now you kind of are the winners of the league. But I think that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Even if they don't necessarily win in 2021, even making a deep playoff run, I don't think that takes anything away from that mentality, that identity of, you go to San Francisco if you want to win, if you want to do well. There's not, is there other, in your summation, maybe that's a question for you. Is there another team that you can kind of aptly say, maybe a Fusion with last year's performance in the regular season at least?
Mm-hmm.
Is there another team that you could go to a player and say, look, you go to this team if you want to do well, that isn't named the Shock?
That's a good one. Yeah, it's weird to say because I think they haven't established a reputation, but I don't know. Maybe it's a gut feeling. Maybe I will be proven terribly wrong, but I think joining a team that's coached by 9K could be becoming that destination in the future.
100%.
That's a wow. I just got shivers from the idea. I by the way, I don't think it's necessarily like the truest framing to say that 9K is a disciple of Crusty. I very much believe he already had qualities before, and I think like sort of like making this master student type of relationship. I would have to talk to people to see if that holds up. But
you want to do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you wax lyrical about 9K and let me go pee?
Sure.
All right, dope. I'll be back.
Right. So it would be super cool to have a situation where, let's say, 9K can build something like 95% Crusty, in terms of like being the destination for where players want to go, trust to be have their level raised, and then have their teams kind of go head to head. I think that's like a dream type narrative that would be developing into just like a super cool storyline if we could continuously flesh it out. Also think that I really enjoy the mystique that both these characters have about them, and while I definitely want to crack open, I don't think anyone even understands why Crusty does what he does. And I don't think they understand yet why 9K could be similar. And I'm not sure I completely understand it yet, or even have a surface level understanding. And now I have this intense drive to find out whatever it is. And I'm not sure if it would be this magical potion or just like a string of very logically sounding practices that are just made stringently, or if it's like a really egocentric type of situation where like they're basic like the Steve Jobs of esports coaching or whatever. I'm not sure. Like I don't even have an an idea what Crusty is about. But they are behind the scenes. There are some unbelievable stories that are being told that we hope to eventually be able to talk about because they're sort of delicate. But I think they're so cool, and I think these types of little tidbits, if we can get them out and sort of like compare, like, okay, call me. Okay, this is going to be the worst. Joke just came back, but if we can have a Crusty 9K to Freud Jung type of situation, this is going to mean something to about 2 people that have very fringe interests. But if this is something that that could be developing, yeah, Jesus. Like I'm honestly like I was kind of like my mind like as soon as I had the idea of just like finding out whatever the magic is, I've just been scribbling along like post-it notes here. I think that would be a really cool piece of content to get an idea what this mystique is. So maybe I can work on that for you guys and make it a project.
Right. See, why does it have to be? I mean, by all means, I want you to do it, right? But let's, for instance, let me plant this seed in your mind, okay? Let me set the stage. Let me paint a picture. Mm-hmm. Let's say Philadelphia has a fantastic 2021. Mm-hmm. And 9K, once again, proves that he's an absolute beast of a coach. Mm-hmm. How is this not a league-run, a league-funded, big-budget piece of content to stick Crusty and 9K in a room and just film it?
It would be hilarious. I think it would be hilarious, too.
I think it'd be insightful. I think it'd be hilarious. I mean, maybe guide them a little bit, but come on. Think of the interest. Think of the hilarity. I think they're, working together. They probably have a good rapport, but it seems like it's right in front of you.
Right.
And you have access to it, or at least, COVID barring, but yeah, I think you're onto something there, 100%.
Yeah, I think this is one of the unexplored stories that is so extraordinary about Overwatch. Like, it's weird. I sometimes I do that where I'm looking up a tweet because like something became topical, and I just search for whatever tweet I made, and I remembered making like a tweet in 2017, I think, or 16, where I basically said, top tier coaches are going to be as big of a deal in Overwatch as the big name players. And I don't think that has ever been a thing outside of Coma for SKT. And I'm not sure if it was warranted there because
as the faker discussion.
Because of the faker discussion. I also don't know enough about it. And I only hear people say that he sometimes threw wacky curveballs that didn't work out. But other than that, I really cannot think of an esport that had so much emphasis on coaches. The amount of coaches, the impact of the coaches, in terms of like, this player goes to this coach and there's a noticeable difference in up and down. I also will say, this is also something that is interesting to me towards the subject of shock players going to other teams with the reputation of like they're really, really good. They could be playing on the shock, so we can get them. There doesn't, like, from the limited sample size, there doesn't seem to be a ton of residual instilled knowledge that holds over these respective talents that depart from the shock to be able to do what they did on the next team. So either they can't adapt with the knowledge that they have into the new systems because the coaches don't facilitate that, or whatever is being taught is so situationally dependent that it isn't universally applicable, if that makes sense, right? Like Nevix going to Toronto Defiant, when we heard he might have been the starter in Season 2 ahead of Choi, doesn't mean that much when he goes to the Defiant and either his knowledge isn't applicable or isn't doesn't hold him over a season, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that, like this, I don't know what kind of magical, like, type of, like potions, like Asterix style, he's cooking up there, but it's intriguing to sort of get behind the secret. And I have no intuitive feeling if the answer to whatever it is that makes his team special would be impressive or super just ordinary stuff. I don't know. I really don't.
Well, maybe that's the thing, is it's ordinary, but to use your, I think, correctly located kind of phrase, he has the eyes for it, right? He's the gatekeeper. He allows the right people, and he knows how to filter and can find those things. And maybe it is just intuitive. Maybe it is, some wacky voodoo stuff that he's concocting over there. But maybe 9K always is. If we're to dive into an alternate reality, maybe 9K is always destined for greatness, as is Crusty. Maybe they just never meet. Maybe Crusty's never given the opportunity to test the filter.
Right.
But you kind of open up an interesting tangent. Is Overwatch, and will Overwatch give us our first true esport coaches?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I also think that players aren't necessarily the best people to ask. I think generally asking about opinions is less conclusive than looking at the actual results. Because
sure, I think it's messy.
Right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, for instance, someone said at Boston, for instance, Crusty didn't really do anything special. Then he left, and then everything turned to dust.
Right.
And they, like, maybe there's something just not tracking. But yeah, I'm wondering. Like, I want to capture that magic in a bottle somehow and
sure.
be able to dissect it, but I'm not sure if that's possible, if it's a thing like that, to get at the core, whatever.
So you're saying are you saying it's too intangible that you can't really quantify
maybe.
it?
I don't know yet. I have no idea.
Ordinary that
yes,
it's not even that interesting.
Yeah, and maybe even players would say it's overhyped or whatever when the results very much speak against that. Right. So I think in the theme of the episode, and I don't think we will get to the soul topic, but Daan was just announced. Daan? Daan?
Daan? Daan? Not another player that I'm, again, not super familiar with. So
same.
Gonna have to wait for an EU rep to kind of come on and teach us some stuff, because
yeah.
I couldn't even tell you what position he plays.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's a main tank, so
okay.
I know that. But yeah, it's it's very different. Like, I also feel like I'm coming into this offseason very differently than in the past seasons, because instead of caring about contenders, I now have to care about other games. So I'll definitely have to do a bunch of research in the next 2 weeks. But yeah, as we said, we can't tell you much. Once again, like, it looks like from the profile of the player, someone that very much fits into this scheme of whatever team they're building. I like that they seem to be having a structure in terms of like, or like a profile in terms of what they're building. And yeah, we'll see how that will develop. Right. Do you have any other topic? Otherwise, I'm looking at the clock. We're at 1.5 hours.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to kind of stop. I think I think people could probably piece together the idea or the feeling about the soul topic, and I think that is one that I do want to get to, because I think there's some spice there. I think people will be surprised with my opinion on that, but yeah, we'll get to that. I think if you kind of look at some of the big through lines throughout this episode, I think you could probably piece it together. So I'll let the comment section and maybe the chat kind of figure that one out. But yeah, I think it's been a fun one. Little all over the place, but never hurt nobody.
Yeah, that's usually what our episodes turn out to be like. I noticed, Joe. Let's see if John just forgets uploading this one like he did last time. Which I didn't fault him for because it was just as chaotic as this one.
Oh, do we want to throw in the Glad talk?
Sure.
Real quick?
Sure.
Because yeah, skewed. No,
right.
Next to nothing about
him. So there, the feedback I got was also very, very polarizing. So some said, meh, super average, like not inspiring. Others said like really good potential, and then others said like worst player in his position in that respective contender season. So it's an interesting one. Generally speaking, the pickups of the Glads, while hyped by the community, have been received like maybe some jealousy going in, maybe not. Maybe people are just like really not that high on these guys, but I've heard similar stuff about Muse. Maybe more positive than Skewed, than what just represented.
Oh,
but
for sure.
Definitely some question marks towards the quality of that tank. Also interesting going into the season as presumably the only main tank. So that's a certain question one will have to ask when evaluating the Glads coming into the season. But then again, like mistakes feel less severe this season because of new contract structures and like even if these players now didn't negotiate or negotiated the 30-day like ability to be have their contract terminated, you can still do that to players once you pick them up if you need them. So if I really need someone in the mid-season and I'm not sure if he's the answer, I can just give him a 30-day and feel very safe about it. Of course, the disadvantage is that you don't have the entire preseason to build synergy. So that's a less adept strategy than figuring it out correctly the first time. I also heard that a lot of coaches are of the opinion that the main tank is the one that should rarely be switched, and that that might be a weakness for teams that are doing it.
Sure.
To which I counter Shanghai and Shock. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. Certainly.
What happened? I mean, 50% of those teams you just listed could be considered the best in the world with the best coaching staff. And then, you know, maybe opinions differ on the other end of that, but it's like 2 out of 20, 1 out of, 2. It's not necessarily a gigantic sample size, but yeah, I'd agree. The tempo dictators, probably not the best places to kind of be shifting around and changing and, shifting gears with, but maybe having a bullpen, maybe having a contenders roster that you're, aligned with and bringing up that talent. Not a bad look, especially this season. And I don't think it's too surprising that more and more coaches are kind of talking about contenders. Maybe not necessarily getting involved directly just yet, but kind of making it known that, they're keeping an eye on contenders and maybe they'll get back in when it works. Yeah. I don't think it's that crazy, especially with the way the contracts are right now, but yeah, good time.
Also, Chad is rightfully pointing out that we haven't talked about Titans Seoul in Boston. I feel pretty confident in saying that this is a topic that will be best talked about in a week or two from now, just because announcement are to be expected, right? Like Soul still hasn't announced an off tank. Titans
really
still has a couple of guys to announce. I know the Boston stuff has been reported, but in that regard, wait, what just happened?
Agilities.
Okay, can I talk about this on air? This man boomed me so hard. I've never been so boomed. I don't think he would mind. Packing boomed the
is this what I think it
out
is?
of me. Wait, let me quickly
This
check.
is a stupid story.
Okay. So, chat, someone quickly scroll through the... Wait, is this a right Valiant account? Is this real?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, boy, Yiska hears about Agilities, has no ability to verify that is actually an actual signing, and therefore won't report on it. What he will do, though, is tease a coach about that signing happening. So, a Yiska makes a Photoshop about the stupid Valcatraz thingy, where the head from Agilities is coming from the top thing. 3 days later, Packing posts that picture on Twitter. No word said. And I'm just like, oh my God, he just boomed me in the neutral. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, now I can't report on it because he might be trolling me heavily, right? I have no ability to verify this one. So I'm just going to have him, like, let him have it. And now it's true. Dude, okay, Packing, okay. Like,
lives in your head rent free, bro.
He's
2 weeks ahead on rent.
You got me. That Packing.
Come on.
Jesus Christ.
The ultimate leak defense.
Yeah.
He's got agents off of Valcatraz. He's working in your mind. Planted the seeds.
Yeah.
He's impervious. No weaknesses.
None. 0 weaknesses.
Yo, shout out to Packing 10. I think he deserves a fat budget. And
yeah,
I want Packing to come bring home a championship. Nothing would make me happier to see him like build his dream roster. And I think he'd probably come on and say like, "Oh, this is my dream roster," but like just a stacked lineup and then coach him to a ring. I think that'd be so sick.
Right.
I think you'd do it too. So shout out to him and yoinking your memes because fuck you.
Yeah. What a guy. So I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching. I will once again shout out the patrons if I can find the tab where they're in. I found it. Joe, I'm so well prepared for this.
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, thank you to Refined Bean for the new pin, Battle Crab, Lolshin, Rexane, Audio Compass, Kasha67, Chara, Picasso, Nathan, Your Misery, Hunter Tane, Fabled Steven, Roger B, Owen, Chris R34444, Horbjorn. I listen to this podcast whilst on the toilet in the shower thinking of Yiska, Peace Camper, Shrek 2 on DVD, Sir Girthalot, and Bronzebot Buhao. We also had subs, but did you take notice of them? I
mean, I personally didn't, but thank God for Eric. We've got some resubs. We've got Pin to Paper, Enco, Sad Albatross, and Willow with the fantastic raid. Definitely love that. And also a 5-star iTunes review. Thank you so much, Boo How. They say #1 acapella intro in North American esports podcast. GG boys. And if you want, your name read, your comment may be read. I don't know if that's necessarily going to continue. We'll see, but you can always do that if COVID's pinching the pocket a little bit, and you don't necessarily have any extra cash to come in and sub or donate. You can always leave a 5-star iTunes review. Helps us with being discovered and all that good stuff and the algorithms and all that magic. So please go do that. We'll shout you out.
All right. Then with that, we say thank you. We're looking forward to having John back, and then we'll see. Keep updated on the Twitter. We don't know yet. We're not that planned. We don't have life figured out to that degree. We still very much suffer from the human condition. Maybe we're crying over the weekend and won't feel anything in us to have an episode on Monday, but maybe we will do. And so we'll have to watch out for our socials. Thanks again. That was Tactical Crouch. See you guys next time. Bye.